we have our next presentation coming up. It's a familiar face. I'm sure you've seen this before, but an important topic. So please welcome our past district governor, Stephen Ramroop, who will present to us on disasters and how we prepare. As you're well aware, we live in a danger zone. So welcome, PDG Stephen.
Thank you very much, Paul. So I'll try to keep to my 15 minutes because speaking about disasters in 15 minutes is a disaster in itself. But you can do it two ways, Paul, Neil. You can play music when I reach 15 minutes, like in the academy, or you can pretend I'm Chris Rock and you're Will Smith. I wouldn't advise you to do that.
I would do that to you.
No, it's fine. So Sonia, thanks very much, District Governor, for inviting me to say a few words. And Louis for visiting us from District 7020. I hope to come to St. Martin, if there are no disasters, of course, in May. It's before the hurricane season, which starts in June, so we should be fine. All right, I would like to, of course, acknowledge all my fellow past governors and any of the district officers, district chairs, or zone officers who might be looking on Zoom. I'm not seeing the Zoom, so I just want to acknowledge. Of course, and my co-chair, our co-chair for disaster, David Edwards, past governor. Of course, all the incoming governors, well, Leslie anyway, DGN, Brian, I don't know if he's here, and of course, District Governor Designate Debbie, who is also from my Rotary Club. All the presidents, all the assistant governors and partners in service, right? Today, I'm going to speak a little bit about disaster very quickly. And one of the things that I want to let you know is, if you look at what happened, how many of you all came into Barbados using the BIM Safe app? Beautiful. Wasn't it very great to come through using that app and come through immigration and customs? Now, that is a sign of good execution of a plan. They would have gotten instructions from the Prime Minister or the Minister. They would have gotten all the IT people together. They would have sat together and organized a plan. They would have done tabletop exercises and tested, maybe using a mystery shopper or a mystery visitor. They would have run through the gaps using the tabletop exercises, and they would have conducted drills to drill it. And that's how you get a very good execution of a plan. That is a very good example. Please give a round of applause to the government of Barbados and all those persons who got that app together. So I would like to ask Paul, we're going to conduct a drill, because this is what I was asked to talk about. How do we, as Rotarians and Rotarian partners, right, prepare for disasters? We are going to get disasters, for sure. It's going to happen. So, Paul.
Can I ask all the delegates from Suriname who are in the room to come forward, please? Surinamese. I need you to stand here. Now,
this is an example of a homogeneous team of persons who travel together, they live together, they communicate together in the same language.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Right.
Now, I need 13 persons from this audience. I need it to be as diverse as possible, so I need some French people.
Random, because we're going to do a drill that looks at how language plays a difference in evacuation of a room that
13.
might be affected by a disaster.
13 people. Please come forward.
This gentleman has volunteered.
Come on, guys.
I need some French. I need some French in here as well.
Like
Adrian Bryan has
Les
volunteered as well.
francophones aussi.
Like the DJ last night.
Oh, okay. We have 13.
Right, just go
We should have
to...
enough. We should have
Paul?
enough now.
You're here. You're here. You're here. You're here.
So one of the most important things that you have to
Wait a
understand...
second. We have to make sure we have... You don't
13,
need more than
go ahead, go ahead.
You want to be 13.
No, you go ahead, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I need 13, so French. So let's see how we eliminate.
Start with Adrian Bryan here.
You. I don't think we can eliminate the district governors, can we?
No. They're on, most important, dignitaries.
All right. We have no more Surinamese?
Right.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so let me de-volunteer some people. Can you de-volunteer yourself, potentially? Thank you. Yes, thanks. So we need Carrie Ann for sure. No, you're staying with Carrie Ann. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Actually, come back, Brenda, and who it was? Brent or Brian? And who was the other person? Oh, Renata. Super. Excellent. So we're good to go. All right. So you take it from here?
No, you can go ahead. Do the drill and I'll explain the drill after.
Okay.
So, okay, let me give you a little preamble.
Yes.
Basically what we're doing, one of the most important things about disasters is you have what we call overt disasters and covert ones. The overt ones are sudden. Earthquakes, fires, a guy with a gun shooting outside, right? And you might be locked in a room. When the fire services come, they need to evacuate. One of the facts about disaster, who dies first in a disaster are the elderly and the disabled.
So what you're going to do is you need to organize yourself for the eldest person to go through this door first.
And the youngest on this end.
And the youngest on this
You
end.
have 3 minutes. Start.
Wait.
The Surinamese.
Suriname needs to organize Suriname, and others need to organize others.
Right, so you have 2 doors.
2 doors, yes. So you need to organize.
Y'all want to disclose your ages now?
The others need to organize, and Suriname needs to organize.
No. Who's younger?
She's younger.
You're younger.
Disaster video.
Not necessarily, not necessarily. They're somewhat organized by age.
I'm timing, yeah. All right. Now, as you do this, I will explain that one of the biggest challenges we have is language, but that is not a problem when we do the tests, because if you have to evacuate this room, for example, if the fire services or the police come, if somebody has a gun shooting or there's fire and your exits are blocked, the fire services will come and you will have to present the most disabled, like after you dance all night at a fete and you have back pain and knee pains, you are disabled because yesterday you weren't. So disablement actually changes. So you have to put the most disabled persons or old persons in front of the door so that when the fire services come, they will take them away because they die. So they have actually done this, and we wouldn't check the ages with anything to get this, is it the truth, is it fair, is it beneficial to all concerned? That's okay, fine, we accept that. They did it under 2 minutes. Please give them a round of applause. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. You guys can go and sit down. Thanks very much.
We should point out that in the second group there was a visually impaired person.
That's correct. So there was an impaired person in the random group, and there was a homogeneous group where persons travel, dance together, and they understand disablement. One of the problems we have in communities is that you might have a village, and the Rotary Club or the Interact Club or the Village Corps or the Rotary Club might visit this village. And when they go to this village, in that village, they might have had a pregnant woman who delivered on the night. So the next morning, she becomes a vulnerable person. So vulnerability changes very quickly. Or you might go to a Rotary fete and fall off the stage. So right away, you were good the day before, but you injured your ankle the next day. Or you might go home very late, and your spouse decides that you came home late and hit you with a piece of wood. So vulnerability changes. So one of the most important things for Rotary clubs, Rotaract, Interact, or all Rotary partners, as we go forward, is that we have to understand that we do what we do very well. There were many leaders in front here. The homogeneous team organized very quickly before the random team. And that makes sense because they understand the village. They know everyone in the village. I'm using that as an example because when first responders go to a village, the police officers and the fire officers, they don't know the village. It is the villagers who know the village. And normally the leaders of that village, whether it be a church group, sports group, Rotary group, village corps, Interact club, they are the leaders and they will know. So when the fire services come to the village, instead of starting giving a hamper and a pamper at the first door, they should understand that the 6th house has a single parent with a disabled person on the bed who got a stroke last night. And you will give that hamper and pamper to that house because by the time you reach that house, they might have had a big problem and you didn't know it. And you being the Rotary Club, bringing hampers and pampers, following a disaster, you don't have a clue that there is a person with a stroke in the 6th house. Am I correct? So therefore, Rotary and Rotarians and Rotary partners, we are leaders. Our strategic plan has told us 2 very important parts of that plan. One is increase the impact of what you do. The 3rd objective says measure your impact. Don't just give hampers and pampers every year. Because when you measure your impact as a Rotary Club or a Rotary engager, you don't understand that after 10, 15 years, you're still giving that same communities hampers and pampers every single time there's flood. And there will be disasters. There is the low frequency, high impact, sudden disasters like earthquakes. Right? And now we have a lot of man-made conflicts. Guys walking around with guns and just shooting. You have to be careful. Anything can happen anytime. And there's the covert ones like the hurricanes, the pandemics. It starts slow. A storm comes, a hurricane comes, you have time to prepare. Preparation is good, like BIMSAFE. But you can't prepare to evacuate this room if something happens right now and there's an explosion and you don't know what to do. And you have chaos inside here with different languages. So therefore, the drill that we did is what we want you to do as Rotary clubs to prepare. Not just give the hampers and pampers. We do that well. Continue to do that. Don't stop that. That's what we are beautiful at doing. And that we have achieved a lot. But what we want you to do is follow the strategic plan and create more impact and legacy. Mark your name down as a president who did this and increase the resiliency of your community. What is resiliency? We keep hearing that word. Resiliency is seen very much by the Japanese as different to the Haitians. And that is why when you look at what's happening in the 2 countries with the same impact, you can see who survives better, who copes better. When I was the head of the Disaster Authority in Trinidad, I used to come to Barbados very often because CDEMA, our Caribbean Development Emergency Management Agency, resides in Barbados. And one of the things is we created a lot of model plans and model legislation. And we looked at many legislations, numbers of legislations, and we couldn't find one country that gave the same definition for disaster. Seriously. Disaster changes and it depends on your perspective. There might be a pandemic that affects the entire world. But America, the UK have all the vaccines, so they don't have a disaster. They're coping with their hazard, which is the pandemic. But small island states and countries that could not develop the vaccines, they suffered. So they had a disaster. The country might have a hazard, a big earthquake or a storm is coming, and everybody copes with it. It's not a disaster. So as Rotarians, you have to understand that it might be a disaster for a home with a disabled person or an aged person, but it's not a disaster for the village. Similarly, there might be a disaster in a flooded village, but it's not a disaster for the local authority or the local region. They might have a disaster for a region in a country, but not necessarily for the entire country. Because basically, a disaster really is when you're unable to cope with the hazard that presents to you. That's it. So you might have all the resources, and you could cope with a hazard. So to take away from today, I have 6.49 minutes again. The most important thing that I would like to say today, about how we go forward as Rotary clubs and what we would like you to do. We have two chairs. We have a response chair in past Governor David Edwards, and I am the mitigation planning chair. The disaster has a cycle. I explained to you how beautiful BIM-Safe was. It's an excellent example of planning which a lot of us experience, because those who didn't have it had to wait a little longer in the line. But those who had it came through, and it was perfect. So there are many contingencies in a disaster, and therefore we as Rotarians have to get ready for it. And how do we get ready for it? Well, I just gave you two examples. The first example is identify the plans that are relevant to your village, your community, your region, or your country. Meet with the relevant authorities in these countries. How do you do that? We have suggested that each club should have a disaster team member. And that person, or if you have anybody in health and safety, anything to do with emergency, you have had training, you have another one, an alternate, in case there's a disaster with the first one. And then in a country that has more than 4 clubs, what we should do is have a national disaster coordinator. So in all of our 74 clubs, we should have 74 persons who at any one time we could throw up on a WhatsApp chat and we can communicate with anyone in French, Dutch, or English right away. And therefore, each one of those persons bring to the table what are some of the problems in their village, in their area. I have also suggested that you begin to look at what is called risk mapping. You see, what happens is that we focus so much on response that we forgot one of the most important things about the human beings, our ability to fight or run. And that is because we possess 2 little almond-sized glands in our head called the amygdala. These glands assess risk, and sometimes we don't even know it. When your child or children comes in front of you in the morning, you will know, for example, who has a problem. Just intuition. And you wouldn't send them to school because you will know who is sick just by how you are. That is us. If you remove all the clothes and all of that, we are just innate animals with basic instincts. But those glands protect us because they allow us to look at risk on a daily basis. But we don't understand risk. It is less risky to travel in an airplane than it is to travel in a taxi. It is more risky to travel in a taxi in Trinidad than to travel in one in Barbados. Sorry, guys. I only have 4 Trinidadians, so I can see that to the... But risk, and this is what I think you should take away from it. Risk is equivalent to a hazard. We don't say disasters in the disaster world. We say hazards. Because if you have a storm in the ocean, it's not a disaster. But if that storm is in your village, it's a disaster. So we say it's a hazard. So risk is equivalent to the hazards. The type of hazard, the earthquake, the storm, the hurricane, the flood, the fire, the gun shooting, the pandemic, those are the hazards. And it's also equivalent to the vulnerability. So the aged person and the disabled more than the healthy person. Okay? So it means more vulnerable you have in your community, more risk. More hazards you have in the community, more severe, more risks. And this is where we come in as Rotarians and Rotarian partners. Underneath that equation is something called capacity. So risk is equal to hazards multiplied by vulnerability, multiplied by exposure, divided by capacity. When we give hampers and pampers, when we plan, when we do the drills, when you drill your schools in the next few months, knowing that I've just taught you a simple drill to do in your schools, in under 3 minutes, you should have worked with your principals, worked with your fire authorities and disaster agencies, and go to your schools and let them evacuate your schools in less than 3 minutes. If you can do that, you can save lives as we go forward. So those are some of the things that you have to do. You do your tabletop exercises. For those of you in the military, there's something called the measle, right? It's very, very simple. It's a list of exercises that we perform. We just did a drill. You can actually do a tabletop exercise virtual. Bring people together. and go through. I have 1 minute and 30 seconds again. Go through. Let them know that I am testing this, right? This can be done very easily virtually. You don't have to go into a village to test it. Go to your village, map the persons with your Red Cross, with other agencies, determine who are disabled and who are aged and who can be disabled tomorrow. This is something that is very easy to do. It has been done via the Red Cross. They have these little programs and models that you can work with, but as Rotarian leaders, we evacuated this room in less than 2 minutes. And that's fantastic, because we had people, I saw Brian coordinating the age. The Surinamese actually knew each other, so they were very easy to do this. This happens very easy in a room like this, but it doesn't happen in schools. It doesn't happen in other areas. So that is my little talk today. I thank you very much. It's just a simple example of what we need to do as we go forward. Plan, prepare, mitigate, be safe. COVID is still around. Avoid a disaster by identifying your hazards, reducing your vulnerability and exposure, but build your capacity, which is in the bottom part of the equation. Many of you all did arithmetic. When you increase the denominator, the fraction drops. So if you increase capacity, risk decreases. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Past District Governor Stephen.